Hey everyone, and welcome! Today, we're going to dive into a system of knowledge that's so vast and so incredibly organized, it's almost like an ancient blueprint for our modern world. We're talking about the Indian Knowledge System, or IKS. We're about to see how ancient thinkers structured their entire universe of knowledge, connecting everything from philosophy all the way to technology.
But first, let me ask you something. What if an ancient civilization created its own kind of Wikipedia? Not just a collection of facts, but a system that connected everything, all of its knowledge in a logical, holistic way. Well, believe it or not, that's pretty much what we're exploring today.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with what the IKS actually is, and then we'll unpack its absolutely brilliant framework. After that, we'll look at some of the incredible achievements in science and engineering that came from it. And finally, we'll wrap up by talking about its lasting legacy.
All right, so first things first, what exactly is this system we're talking about? Let's get a really clear definition.
Okay, so the Indian knowledge system is this enormous body of knowledge that was developed in India over thousands of years. But here's the key. It wasn't just about learning stuff. The real goal was the holistic development of a person, their body, their mind, and their character. And the way they did that was by always connecting big ideas with practical, real-world applications.
And this is pretty cool. You're actually looking at the raw source material for this explainer. As you can see from these notes, the IKS is this massive umbrella. It covers everything from philosophy and science to art, ethics, and spirituality. It really wasn't just a random collection of subjects. It was designed to be a complete system for living a full life.
Okay, so if you have all this knowledge, how on earth do you organize it all? Well, the IKS has a brilliant answer for that. It's got a core framework, a super logical structure that makes sense of the whole thing. Let's take a look at how it's built. And believe it or not, it all boils down to this one number, 14. The entire educational system, which was known as Katurdasa Vidyasanam, is built on 14 distinct but deeply interconnected branches of knowledge.
And this table just lays it out perfectly. Think of it like a modern university, right? You've got the four Vedas, that's your core curriculum, the main source of spiritual and philosophical ideas. Then you've got the six Vedangas, which are kind of like the auxiliary sciences or the tools you need to really get that core curriculum. And finally, you have the four Upavedas, which are like the professional schools for applied knowledge, for real everyday life.
So let's quickly look at that core curriculum. The Rig Veda is the oldest one, full of these foundational hymns and big philosophical ideas about creation. Then the Yajurveda comes along and acts as a practical manual, turning those ideas into rituals. The Samaveda sets those ideas to music, and this actually forms the basis of Indian classical music. And the Atharva Veda is fascinatingly practical. It's packed with knowledge about medicine, healing, and even social rules. Now, to understand those core texts perfectly, you needed these 6 scientific tools, the Vedangas. You can think of them as the sciences of interpretation. They covered everything from phonetics for a perfect pronunciation to a highly logical grammar system for language, and even astronomy for calculating time. These tools made sure that the knowledge was preserved and understood with absolute precision. And here is where all that philosophy meets the real world. The Upavedas are the applied sciences. This is where we get Ayurveda, the holistic system of medicine and health. We get the Dhanurveda, the science of warfare, Gandharva Veda, which covers all the performing arts, and Sthapatya Veda, the science of architecture and city planning. This is knowledge put directly into action. So we have this incredible framework. But what did it actually produce? Let's get to the good stuff and look at some of its most groundbreaking contributions, starting with science and mathematics. So I'll start with a question for you. Out of everything, what do you think is ancient India's single greatest gift to the world of mathematics? If you guessed 0, you are absolutely spot on. The concept of shunya, or zero, is honestly one of the most important intellectual leaps in all of human history. And as these notes show, this revolutionary idea traveled from India all across the globe, becoming the absolute bedrock of modern mathematics.
See, the crucial thing to understand is that it wasn't just a symbol for nothing. First, it was used as a placeholder, which is what made the decimal system possible in the first place. Then, the mathematician Brahmagupta formally defined it as a number in its own right, with rules for how to add and subtract it. And that single innovation laid the foundation for everything: algebra, calculus, and, yep, the very binary code that powers the digital world we're all living in right now. But this system's genius wasn't just about abstract concepts and numbers. It also led to an incredible mastery of the physical world, in arts, in engineering, and in building an entire civilization.
I mean, take metallurgy, for example. Ancient India had this unbelievably advanced knowledge of metalworking. We're talking about high-quality steel that was famous across the ancient world, techniques for making rust-resistant iron that still puzzles some engineers today, and get this, the world's very first distillation of zinc. That was a huge scientific achievement, way ahead of its time.
And this scientific approach applied to how they built their cities, too. Ancient Indian towns, like the ones from the Harappan civilization, were scientifically planned out. They used grid layouts with straight roads crossing at perfect right angles, and they had these incredibly sophisticated covered drainage systems. This shows they weren't just thinking about buildings, they were focused on public health and organized community life.
And of course, there's the architecture. Indian temples are this perfect blend of science, art, and spirituality. Every single part had a purpose, from the Garbhagriha, the inner sanctum that held the spiritual center, to the towering spires called shikara, which were total marvels of engineering. These weren't just buildings, they were complex, 3D models of the entire cosmos. So, let's bring this all together. We've seen the structure, we've seen the incredible results, but why does any of this ancient stuff still matter in the 21st century? What is its enduring legacy for us today? So, what's the big takeaway here? Well, the legacy of the IKS is profound. It was a true multidisciplinary curriculum that always connected ideas with action. It shows a deep-rooted scientific tradition in India that goes back thousands of years. It was the intellectual engine behind legendary ancient universities like Takshila and Nalanda. And what's wild is that its logical systems, like the grammar for Sanskrit, are now being studied for applications in computer science and natural language processing. But above all, its main goal was holistic development, creating well-rounded people who were skilled in science, art, and ethics. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. You know, we live in an age of hyper-specialization, where knowledge is so often locked away in separate boxes. So what can we learn from an ancient system that saw absolutely no conflict between science, art, and spirituality? A system that believed real wisdom was found in seeing how everything connects. Thanks for joining me on this one.